All right, folks, we're going to have a edition of the online dinner party, and definitely have got a very special guest. We're here in the evening time on this particular show. I'm actually at my job at the Hayti Heritage Center where they're having a jazz concert, but I'm very much fortunate to have Jennifer Owinda on as my guest, and she's involved in a lot of things that are going on and all in that space. So definitely looking forward to an amazing conversation with Jennifer and seeing what she's got going on in her world and with all the different things that she is doing as well. So definitely is looking forward to an amazing conversation and seeing where we go and where things may be happening in that regard. So I know a lot of folks are very excited about a number of the things that are happening in our world and with our world and all along those lines. So I'm definitely looking forward to this great conversation and seeing how it goes in that sense. So, Jennifer, glad that you were able to be here with us and all along those lines. So, definitely glad to see what you've got going on and what's happening in your life. So, definitely some amazing things are taking place and looking forward to hearing more about what you've got going on because I know recently we did a jazz concert with some of the same musicians that are here and they were talking about the notion of assisted living because the brother Yusef was a jazz legend and he lived in an assisted living facility. And some folks were saying that in his latter years, that some of that wasn't done in the best care. And I know that that's part of what your book deals with as well, is how sometimes the care isn't as good as we would like it to be, and all along those lines. So if you can share a little bit about the book and what the book is all about, I know that our audience would love to hear a number of those thoughts as well.
All right. Thank you very much for having me on the show. Yes, I've written a lot about senior care over the years, being a dementia practitioner, a senior care advisor, a death doula as well. I've gone through a lot of different experiences and I like to share them so everyone can kind of have an idea of what to expect. Because a lot of times we all come into it having the same questions. And so I write books to just put the information out there. The particular book you're talking about is one that I just released in March of this year. It's called Cold Hearts, Warm Bodies, The Secrets Inside Assisted Living. And the reason I called it Cold Hearts, Warm Bodies is because in my almost 20 years in this industry, a lot of times we're just hiring warm bodies because we don't have a lot of people out there that are willing to accept low wages to provide personal care when they can make the same amount of money, doing retail or, something like that. So, or even going at the McDonald's thing, or I don't know, being a receptionist somewhere, whatever, it doesn't pay well. The hands-on tasks that you have to provide in senior living facilities, we're talking bathing and dressing and grooming and redirecting and people with confusion and dementia, and it's a lot, and it's a lot on the caregivers. And unfortunately we are hiring warm bodies a lot of the time. The cold hearts is because unfortunately there's a lot of cold hearts, and I don't mean just coming from some of those caregivers that are working 2 and 3 jobs, that some of them really do care, but they're exhausted. They can't pay their bills already, and they're exhausting themselves, and a lot of times it's hard to get them to be able to provide that care or get off their phones. It's not always the I'm tired of work. Sometimes it's I just want to, I guess it is work, right? Want to zone out into the phone. Well, anyways, senior care is lacking dearly in our country, and people need to understand what really it is like living and working in a senior living facility, and especially if you are on state Medicaid, because in that regard, if you can't pay, let's say, $8,000 or more a month for your grandmother or your loved one to have dementia care or all of those help with that incontinence and things, then you may be subject to a facility that is not the best But anyways, so yeah, cold hearts, warm bodies. That's why I called it that. The secrets inside assisted living, so everyone can understand. It's SOS, sales only sales. You got to fill up that building. The room's got to be full. The census has to be high because that's the revenue. That's 100% of the revenue. The hair salon ain't giving you no revenue. The outings ain't going to give you no real money, but $8,000 to $10,000 a month will, right? So if you got 50 or 100 rooms, you got to keep it full. It's all about sales. So
Well, it definitely sounds like about sales. Jennifer, one of the things I was curious about is I know that here we have some assisted livings, the facilities that are seen as the top of the line. They come out to events, they bring their patients to concerts, they do a number of things like that. Like I said, then there are some of the other ones that are less accommodating. They don't do as much. And sometimes it seems that part of it is socioeconomics, because definitely it does seem like there are some that are don't have as much of the amenities as you would like. I mean, we do have one in downtown Durham, where I'm based at, Durham, North Carolina, that seems to try to bring some activities to the people and everything. But then, like I said, I know that there are some others that are more affluent. Some of the folks that are a little bit more rich can afford those kind of facilities. And I was just wondering how much is the socioeconomic classes playing a role in the way that we treat our elderly?
oh, that's huge right there, because your private pay facilities, some of them have entertainment, 7 days a week,
Right.
right? Some of them have the great big bus that they take the residents to the
Right.
county fair. And these activity directors, I can tell you, I was an activity director for almost 7 years, and I was all about trying to get them to the symphony and to the Nutcrackers and all these different places, even people with advanced dementia. If you could get in that wheelchair, we could get you on that lift on that bus and we could take you, even if it was just for the first half of the show, right? And even if we did have to maneuver it a certain way. So there are a lot of people who can afford those nice facilities that can have more resources, have more full-time activity directors and bus drivers and things like that. The Medicaid facilities don't necessarily have a good reimbursement rate in order to accommodate that type of thing. So this book, it talks a lot about that too. Like, what do we want in our future? Right now, these facilities are being built like the 1900s facilities, and here we're almost in halfway into the new millennium, right? Don't we need to upgrade? Shouldn't we be getting better at this? Right. And so that's kind of what the book, says. If you are drooling, you've got advanced dementia, do you want another medical procedure to keep you alive? This is some real questions that we need to answer. Can you afford? Do you have private long-term care insurance? And is it only, and so there's a lot of questions
Yeah,
that this
definitely.
book prompts as
Definitely.
well.
And speaking of that and everything, I know that I had a aunt that I believe had either dementia or Alzheimer's. I'm trying to remember which one Aunt Elaine had. She was my great aunt and all in that space. But could you talk a little bit about the difference? Because I do know that sometimes people are thinking dementia and Alzheimer's are the same, and even that personal care that you were talking about. Because I know I had another aunt that passed away of MS and all along those lines, and we were actually trying to decide whether we were going to keep the lift or upgrade the lift, which I think mom decided to upgrade it because she's getting older. She's in her early 80s and everything, and my brother now has MS as well. So we're definitely thinking that it might be useful to have it upgraded and all along those spaces versus the one that was there when my aunt Carolyn was living and all along those lines. So could you talk about a little bit about home care and also the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's?
Yeah. Wow. My heart goes out to you. That's a lot. It's a lot to handle when it's hard for even one person in the family, but multiple people, that's like really rough. Yeah, so I'm a dementia practitioner as well. I work with hands-on with people who have dementia every day. And the confusion is there's so many different things that cause dementia, right? A traumatic brain injury can cause dementia. Drug and alcohol abuse can cause dementia. Alzheimer's disease will cause dementia. If you live long enough with it, it's going to take you out, but it's going to be the dementia. Now you'll have these dementia symptoms. Parkinson's disease causes dementia. A massive stroke can cause dementia,
Mhm.
vascular disease, right? There's all these different things that can cause dementia. Alzheimer's is just one thing that causes dementia. So if you have a loved one that is diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they might still be like, oh man, I got Alzheimer's. Maybe I need to be eating better, or maybe I need to do this, and maybe I should take some vitamins. And I'm going to go to the gym, right? They're still trying. They might have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have developed dementia yet. So dementia is those symptoms. With Alzheimer's specifically, it's a memory thing. You just a loss of where you're at, a loss of what time of the day, what year it is, a loss of words, being able to find the right word to say, a loss of emotional inhibitions, and all these different things, right? So Alzheimer's, that particular disease, causes symptoms of dementia. Parkinson's, those are different symptoms though. My grandfather had Parkinson's. He had memory loss towards the end, but it wasn't like my grandmother who had Alzheimer's disease. She had memory loss right in the beginning, right? So all these different things cause dementia. Now, home care is going to be your best option. Everybody wants to die in their home. Okay, we promised our spouses and our loved ones, I'll never put you in an institution. I'm going to take care of you at home. But there are some issues sometimes with that, because what we see in senior care a lot of times is the well spouse
Mhm.
gets sick and dies before the person that they were caring for, because they gave all their energy and everything, and they weren't able to sleep at night. They couldn't lock, they were trying to lock the door and keep them from going out the front door. They couldn't even take a nap in the day. They couldn't get to the grocery store, so it's very depleting when you have someone that you live with that has dementia. It's a 24-hour, a lot. It's a lot, right? So if you have a caregiver coming into the home that can relieve you some of the time, or if you have somehow get this person involved. Did they see? I'm an activity director, like springs in my brain. I'm like, did they tinker with cars? Let's take them to a car place. Did they? We can take them to a junkyard. They could pick whatever out they want, right? You have to try and figure out each person and what they liked, so you can keep them feeling useful, because their memory loss is short term. They still remember when they were working potentially. Maybe they think they're a kid and they're looking for their mom now. Okay. They've reverted back if they have Alzheimer's dementia, and you still got to figure out a way to make them feel useful, because what purpose do they have in life? If you don't give them purpose in life, they're probably going to start having behaviors, and they're going to be uncomfortable. They're always looking to go somewhere or to do something, right? And so a home care person could help alleviate a little of that pressure on the caregiver, implement some activities during the day, something like that. If it gets to the point where this person might slip out, or they need more care than an in-home caregiver can provide, or I mean, that's like $200,000, $300,000 a year now, private, for that private caregiver. It's a lot.
Well, that is a
So
whole lot. Hey, Jennifer, along those same lines, how much should because I know this was a conversation that came up with my great aunt and everything, because sometimes they don't always remember what we would like them to remember, and sometimes they might even have memories that are what some people might call regression, or things that are going back in time. So they might even ask you about things that you might not even be aware of, because you might not have been part of that time frame that they are referring to. So how much in your experience do you think that people should just kind of go with the flow? Like if they're calling you a relative that isn't even around anymore, or if they're calling you other names, how much of that should you go with the flow, or how much of that should you try to bring them back to a sense of what we consider modern day reality, and all along those lines? I was just wondering your take on that, because I do know some people will be like, no, I'm not your, let's just say your spouse. I'm not your spouse, and you're calling me your spouse, or all along those lines, where I'm not Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob has been gone for decades and everything in that
yeah.
space, but there's calling you Uncle Bob. So how much of that should you just kind of go with the flow, or how much of that should you try to make corrections in your expert opinion?
So I like to write books on this because one, I'm passionate about it. I'm really interested in it, right? And I want everybody to understand because it's about to increase by 200% in the next 20 years. So we're going to see a lot more people who are diagnosed with not just a disease that causes dementia, but actual dementia. So it's imperative that everyone understands that that part of the brain is dead. That one is gone. You are never going to get them into your reality. You are never going to make them understand anything about right now. This whole scenario, wherever they are, it's all confusing. Date, time, current events, all of that is gone. If they have reverted to the past, they might have some moments of lucidity, where they are, they'll call you by your first name. They'll remember who you are, or, they just seem to know that today is, July 14th or whatever the date is, right? But for the most part, they're going to remain confused as the dementia progresses. They will never come back to what they were before. So you need to go with the flow. If you, at all times, I'm not going to convince this person who is delusional, who told me that I stole her car, told me I stole just yesterday, you stole my car and you gave it to my husband. And I was like, I'm so sorry. That is horrible. I'm so sorry. Right. I'm going to apologize. And she's telling me, you better do something about this. You better get me a taxi, all that kind of stuff. Okay. And this is like her motto right around 2 o'clock. She starts sundowning and then she's trying to get out of here. She's looking for a way. She's looking for her dad, or she's looking for her husband, or whatever, right? I cannot convince her that she don't drive no more. I can't convince her that she has dementia. I can't convince her that, today is whatever the date it is. There's no convincing someone like that. That's done. So if you are trying to convince them, you're only going to create, a negative energy because they know they're right, you're wrong, and you're right and they're wrong. That just never comes out right. You
That
can't argue.
never comes out right at all. One of
Yeah.
the things I was curious about is that you are also involved in a field that is very much something that has been on TV quite a bit, and there are a number of TV shows about it. As a matter of fact, I was just watching one yesterday that features EMTs and all along those lines. So I'll tell you what I was watching. I was watching Chicago Fire. So I was watching Chicago Fire, and I know that that features some of the EMTs as well as the firefighters and all along those lines. So it does have a kind of a romantic atmosphere, and I know it's a very difficult field and all along those lines. So I just wondered, because I even remember the old Emergency with the old TV show. Yes, I just dated myself, and all along those lines. But I just wonder your thoughts around some of these Hollywood images of the kind of the romantic atmosphere of what goes on in an emergency room or with EMTs or a number of other things. Because I do sometimes think that, like a number of things, including our police officers, it can be overly romanticized. And definitely, I mean, there's all the lovely romantic fictional parts that go into the conversations. And of course, you got to do that for dramatic effect and all along those lines. But they do tough time talk about the tough things. I know that one of the episodes, it might have been Chicago Fire, we're talking about the loss of a fire officer and how they revolved around that and how they made a statue or something that was like a memorial to honor one of their fallen soldiers. And on one of the episodes that I saw, I believe that was Chicago Fire. It might have been one of the other shows similar to that and everything. But I just wondered your take on how Hollywood treats the nature of emergency technicians, which you also have that in your wheelhouse of skills also.
Yeah, so of course Hollywood has to sell their product, right? This stuff is any job. I mean, they could probably put my job on TV and romanticize it, but it is nuts, right? There's no you can try and have as much fun as you want at work, but when people are dying, it's not, real fun, right? It's when people are bleeding, it doesn't matter if you are skilled and are hyped up on adrenaline, and some people really get off on that stuff, right? But it is real life and it's nothing romantic. And I mean, they put love scenes on TV, and they're nothing like real life now, are they? I'm like, that doesn't happen, right? So I think it's just, that part of it is just to sell,
To sell that part is definitely. But
yeah.
there's another field that you are into as well, and I definitely want to get into this also because some people do not understand that. A friend of mine has a dear saying. He says that we all know our birthday, we celebrate our birthdays. Now, some people can argue whether we celebrate our birthday or our conception dates, because that's been a whole conversation with one of our other shows where they have talked about that around the abortion issue and all along those lines. And I kind of agree with Toby. We celebrate birthdays and not necessarily conception days, but that's neither here nor there in this particular conversation. But another thing that my friend, who is actually a stroke survivor, says is that none of us know our end time. Only the man above or the woman above has an idea of what that time will be and everything. But you actually are one of those folks, and I have another friend that does it as well. Actually, I got a couple of friends that do it, that is helping people make that next phase of life, whether that is just an absolute end, which some people believe it is, or whether it is going to another dimension, whether that is heaven or whatever other folks might want to call it, or all along those lines, or maybe even coming back and repeating this life, because there are different philosophies that different people have about this notion of what happens after we go and everything. But what you seem like a very vibrant young lady and everything. So what got you into wanting to be a death doula? I imagine part of it was your own wanting to be there for your own relatives, because you just mentioned that you lost a relative and all in that space. Well, what got you into wanting to be a death doula, and what advice would you give to others that are thinking about going into that particular field? And also just in general, do you think that we spend enough time even thinking about that? Because a lot of us, I've said on this show and several other shows that I know nobody has made it unless you go by the Bible, and there are some people in the Bible that they claim made it, but I'm personally going for 200. Not doing the things that you need to do to make it 200, because I'm definitely eating too much fast food. I had fast food earlier today, ordered DoorDash and went to Wendy's and all in that space. Definitely not doing enough exercise. Probably are having some other bad habits. I'd be lying if I said I don't have a cold one that might be alcoholic every once in a while. Not enough to be abusive of it, but I definitely have some drinks and don't smoke. That's a good thing. But there are other things that I do that are probably not helpful to my health and all along those lines. So definitely, like I said, hopefully I'll be here to 200. That's my personal goal, even though I think part of it is a mindset. So if I go for 200 and I only make it, I'm 61. So if I only make it to 81, hey, I made it at least part of the way to 200, and I was having fun all the way there and everything. And if tomorrow something happens, I still was having fun all the way to whatever the end date is. So what got you into this death doula kind of field?
All right. Well, actually, 3 out of 4 of my grandparents had a condition or disease that led to dementia. That's what got me into senior living.
Mm.
Then from there, of course, working with so many people who had advanced dementia or, terminal illnesses, or both, right? Watching them go through that final transition and being that support system to the family, helping them understand what is next and plan, and kind of can keep some control over that final, your wishes and your last stages, right? Your last chapter all of it should be yours. Yeah, you couldn't write out your first chapter because that's when you were born, right? But your mom could have planned your delivery date with, medical intervention, right?
Right.
Now you can plan your death, through medical aid in dying or death with dignity, or depending on what state you're in. It's not legal everywhere. But if you are suffering, that is an option for some people. Um, Becoming a death doula was definitely the next step into helping people come to terms with what's going to happen, whether it's transitioning through that dementia process, or just I can't breathe anymore, or back and forth to the hospital, another UTI or whatever, right? And so I help people through senior care and senior living planning, all the way through that dementia piece and all the way to the door. I can't go through that door with you, but I can hold your hand. I could have helped you plan your vigil and helped you live out your last wishes, on your final dreams, help you tie up life loose ends, or been that listening, unbiased ear for you to vent, or do some guided imagery with you, right? So that's what a death doula does. It gives support and resources. Working with hospice, right? I don't administer meds as a death doula, that oxy and that morphine and all those liquid meds. I don't do that, but some people do. I'm just personally, I'm not doing that. I'm not providing ADLs as a death doula. I'm not changing briefs or doing those turns. That would have to be the hospice nurses and CNAs that are coming in. It would have to be the family, or have to be caregivers that are in senior living or whatever. So being a death doula was just a natural transition through senior care, through dementia, and then, of course, that dying process. So being that support system for that family and helping people have options and remain in control to some extent, plan out their legacy or their burial, or however maybe they wanted to be, buried at sea, right? Or in a tree pod, right? And so there's all these different options, and sometimes people don't know what those options are. Being that support system, even through those emergency rooms. And, so not everyone is on hospice already, right? But they're falling apart, and they want a death doula, that extra support there for that patient and for that, family. So that's what a death doula does. Not everyone does it provides all of the same services. I also extend my services a bit more, help people with that activity programming, because it's so important, because if you know what, it's once a man, twice a child. Okay. So if you've got a little toddler and he ain't got nothing to do, he's going to find something to do if you don't give him something to do. So you might as well keep him productive and keep it positive and give quality of life before behaviors occur. So I help with that. Actually, the book that I'm about to publish in about a month, it's winter of this year. It is Navigating Senior Care, Dementia, and Dying. So it is an all-inclusive book of the whole stages of those last chapters of life, helping people understand their options and plan and know what to expect. And it's just going to help people a lot. So if you've got questions about what happens, what does it look like when someone is dying? Yeah, you can YouTube it, right? I'm sure you probably can YouTube anything.
You can just about anything. But along those same lines, I was just wondering, because I know that part of your background is also being from the islands, and ironically, the performer that was performing here has some island roots as well. So I was just wondering, I know that certain cultures are a little bit more in tune with their care of the elderly, and all along those lines. I've got some family members that are more attached to their Native American roots. I've got definitely some friends that are more attached to their African roots, and not just African American, but their African roots. And I know that a lot of those cultures are very much in tune with the multi-generational approach to life and everything. And then when I think of the reggae culture and the Rastafaris, they definitely seem to be very much in tune to being a multicultural kind of society and a respect for the elderly and all along those lines. So I was just wondering how much of that played into your upbringing and into your doing the work that you do.
Yeah. I've been a Rasta woman for all of my adult life, and it's different for everyone. There's different types of Rastas, I guess, now. And some Rastas, they shun death. They say Fayabun death and, things like that. But when it comes to our time, say your family is Catholic and you're a Rastaman, and your family is now going to take care of your body, is going to maybe shave up your locks you done had for 40 years. Maybe they're going to have you holding the cross and you've been burning fire upon the cross or something. I don't know. Everybody's different, right? So whether you're a Rastaman or whether you're from another culture or ethnic upbringing, whatever you've decided, or another religion or whatever, everyone should have it the way they want it, right? They should have their wishes respected at the end of life. While you could make those decisions, that's when you need to write them down. You need to make sure your close people know what your wishes are. But it is different for every Rasta.
No,
So,
definitely. You said something interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this as well. I was involved some time back with a group called the Funky Eye Puppets. It was actually an Asian gentleman that created it that was also attached to George Lucas way back when, but a lot of us were adults and very much involved in it. It was a voice troupe, a voice kind of troupe that was dealing with characters and a number of those other things. I do not consider myself the greatest actor and all along those lines, but I definitely still enjoyed doing the voice work and some of that work and need to get back in touch with IBC and all along those lines. But one of the things that he tried to get us all to do was to do something that you just mentioned, even with the care of those that are elderly, which is getting back in touch with our youth and being in touch with that young spirit and all along those lines. So I just wondered, as one that talks to people that are in the elderly care, how important is it for you to give them a sense of play? Because that's something that I think that even as adults, even young adults in their 20s and 30s, don't oftentimes are feeling that, we got to get caught up in the life goals and all the work and the hustle and bustle, and we forget that aspect of play. And so I just wondered, even in your care for the elderly and in some of the harsh realities that you see, how important is it for you as a person to have a sense of play, and how is it important is it for your clients to have a sense of play as well?
oh yeah, that's very important. I mean, if someone, I like there's this one lady, she's got all these paintings, and of course they can't be up in the senior living because it's small, but she's a painter. And so we need to break out those paints all the time. Even though her painting, right now, you actually give her the brush, you put it in the paint, and then you put her hand with the brush on the paper, okay, just to get her started. So she can't initiate it anymore, but she's still doing something that she loves, and that's very important, having that. So, like me, I write, I do art, I love gardening. There's certain things that I love, right? And if I was to develop dementia, I should be able to still do some of those things that I love as much as I possibly can. But that social aspect is really important. The children being around, it's fairly new, not even 100 years old, that people are, cast off when they're seniors. It used to be different generations living in the same household, multiple generations and taking care of each other. But now, people move off to the cities and do their thing, right? You're in New York and your loved one is over here, and it's hard to bring it together. So since there's so much going on in that respect, you don't see your family as much anymore. That depression sinks in, that loneliness, especially if you have mobility issues, you feel hopeless, so it's really important to give people quality of life and purpose in life. You
Definitely
just,
think that. You
yeah.
mentioned earlier hospice and everything. I had a friend of mine that is actually my boss at another arts institution that I worked at and everything, and she passed away at a relatively young age. I think that she might have been in her 50s when she passed, or it might have even been around that time frame. I don't think she had hit 60 yet. I think she was probably around 50 or something along those lines. Might have even been late 40s, but I'm trying to remember as to what the Butina's age when she passed was. But she was in the hospice, and one of the things that I felt was that sometimes that might have been, and she was dealing with the issues around cancer and everything. But I do sometimes wonder if sometimes hospice isn't, not everybody's ready for hospice, because sometimes if you're putting in hospice, you feel that that's the end and everything. So I was just wondering, at what point do you think people should be considering hospice? And do you agree that sometimes hospice may not be the answer, because a lot of times people are feeling that if they are in hospice, that that's like a death sentence, for lack of a better term, and everything. And I do know that there have been people that have lived in their hospice care for years, if not decades, and all along those lines. But definitely, I do think that sometimes people give up when they go into hospice because that's already what they feel is a completion of that death sentence. But I'm just wondering your thoughts around that.
Yeah, there is an old way of thinking about hospice, unfortunately, and that stigma, it's hard to get rid of. I have so many people graduating off of hospice. It's painful for me because that means that we have to do the bathing and that we have to do the this and provide the briefs and the wipes and all that stuff. Whereas hospice, when they're on board, They do a lot. They got CNAs coming every couple of days to help. They got hospice nurses that are coming out just to check on them. You know what I mean? You get all this added comfort. They provide comfort care is what hospice is all about. So I love hospice. I'm an advocate for hospice. Of course, I'm in the state of Arizona and there are over 200 hospice companies. I think that's a little over the top there, but it's big money. So there are some issues in hospice, but any business, right? Hospice is funded by Medicare. So you've already paid into it if you've been working all these years. But a lot of people, they choose to wait really long. I mean, what is the average number of days someone is in hospice? Is like a week or less or something, because they waited until the last minute when they could have gotten all that extra support to prop them up and perk them up. And now it's too late
No doubt
because
about that and everything. I hear what you're
yeah.
saying. I wanted to go to the animation as well, but I got to take a brief pause just for a second so I can check on my folks and everything. It looks like they're actually getting out of here sooner than I thought, so we can complete the interview. But if you give me 1 second, I'm going to just put it on pause and then we'll continue the conversation. So I'm going to actually hit the pause button and then disappear for a minute, but I'll be right back and we'll continue this very enlightening conversation. So I'm back. So one of the things I saw was that one of the ways that you get your message out is to animation. And I mentioned some of the other things that are going on with even IPC. And like I said, he was very involved with George Lucas and he's got some animation going on. So what got you into animation? And is this something that you feel is helping you get your message out? And do you think it is helping you reach a younger audience? Because, you know, some of us, and like I said, I don't have any kids of my own, but I've got my two nephews and I'm sure that at the age of 14, they probably feel that they are invincible and that they will probably be around forever, like many of a teenager and all in that space, because we oftentimes don't want to think about the realities of life and death and dying and all along those lines. And definitely people have different belief systems that help them get through as well and everything. But I was just wondering, do you think that by the fact that some of your stories are in animation, I don't know if you've gotten into the whole TikTok craze, but maybe that is helping you get the message out as well. But how important is it for you to use animation to reach a younger demographics?
I think the animation is fun. It's definitely a bit more fun than, you know, just listening to me talk, right, and sing me. And so I think it's more catchy. I love the idea of animation. It gets, and the ones that I did were 30 to 60 seconds because, you know, the attention span needs to, it needs to just get you through it right now. And then you can click on to the next one or click onto something else, right? So the animations were created to showcase several of the stories that are in the book, Cold Hearts, Warm Bodies, The Secrets Inside Assisted Living. That is a book with my story of senior living, but then I've weaved in other people's stories as well, little short stories, and I made animation skits off of these short stories that are in there. So some of it's so funny, some of it is distressing, but it's real life, even if it's animated.
It looks like you've also done some books that aren't always just strictly on the whole notion of emergency work or even the spirit of death doula and along those lines. Because I've also seen that you have written some books that have to do with things like world history. And I'm trying to figure out which part of world history that you are interested in. Maybe you're a fan of Cleopatra or Nefertiti, or maybe it's one of those great English kings or queens or somebody else out there, maybe even Shaka Zulu, because I do know there are some great historical figures. And I also saw that you've written some books on something that is very dear to many people, as a lot of folks are feeling that we are not doing good things for our environment. So it seems like you've also written some books that touch on environmental conservation. So how do you tie all these topics together? And is there a particular part of world history that you're a big fan of? And how do you tie in environmental conservation to some of the other things that you write about?
I started writing books when I was 9 years old.
Okay.
And they were just, you know, fun little stories. As I grew older, I was born in the Virgin Islands, raised in Oakland, California, became a Rasta woman when I was a teenager, right? started growing my locks, all that stuff. So started getting into the light of Rastafari, of, you know, the Black Panthers, African liberation movements, the slave trade, all of that kind of stuff. So I wrote several books about the slave trade, you know, starting in the Western slave trade. I haven't done the Eastern slave trade yet, although that would be a great book. It's 1,000 years even before the Western slave trade started, right? So that's a lot of information, but I do them for children because you and I, we can pick up a 300 or 25-hour book and read that. It's boring for children. So the children's books that I do have colorful illustrations, and they are history. Whether it's the book about the slave trade, or whether it's a book about King Lalibela and the rock-hewn churches of Ethiopia. I love to do these historical books. King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and the transfer of the Ark of the Covenant from Israel to Ethiopia 3,000 years ago. Rastafari, 225th descendant of King David, that kind of stuff, right? So I do a lot of Rasta, African, Afrocentric books and things. But I also do anything that I feel passionate about. So I'm a very busy body, and I like to do a lot of things. So I've done books about dementia, children's books to help people understand dementia. I did ABC, Alzheimer's book for children, different activities to do with someone who has dementia, you know, brain tour, which is different parts of the brain that are affected by dementia. Showing how, you know, the child is growing and maybe the elder is declining with that brain, you know, situation that's going on, right? So done lots of, even one for teenagers. I did Decrypting Dementia for Teens.
Oh,
That just gives a lot more information about dementia in itself. And of course, I'm about to do this other book as well. But the environmental conservation books, I think what really sparked that is the first time that I went to Kenya, East Africa. My husband is from Kenya, and his mom lives in the village, not in the city where there's garbage, but in the village. And there was no garbage can. I asked her, "Where's the garbage can?" She didn't know what I was talking about. And she was like, what are you trying to do?" Right. And I was like, "I got this plastic bag or whatever it was I had." And she, just put it over there. And I was like, "Okay." She didn't have a garbage can. She grow all her own food, you know, all the maize, she's grinding it up, right? She didn't have garbage. And so I was like, wow. And
it's
all this garbage
amazing.
that
It's
I deal with
amazing.
every day, everything comes in a bag, in a box, all this processed stuff, all the stuff I accumulate in the house, right? And so I think that is what made me start doing the environmental conservation type stuff for children. Um,
It's amazing that you said that because we have a show here on the network, Pod TV, and everything. Is actually a woman that is from Latin America, Vivian Andreada, and all along those lines. And one of the things that she is gone back to is to her homeland of Colombia, and definitely has had some other folks that have gone to Colombia, which is in South America, and all along those lines. And that's actually what they have noticed as well, is that despite the stereotypes that we give about other countries that are quote unquote third world or second world, in a lot of ways they might be more advanced than we are. So I've heard that about Kenya also, and even some of the other African nations. And it does seem like there are some of these stereotypes that exist, that they are poor and suffering. And I'm not saying that there aren't some suffering aspects to some of those countries, but some of the basic things that you need, like home care, and some of the things that you need, including being in a clean environment, they seem to be doing better than those of us here in the West. And I just wondered if that's something that you have observed, because you seem to be a world traveler, with having that husband from Kenya and having probably traveled to other parts of the world as well. Because I know that definitely Viviana has brought that up, and even one of the founders here, who I think has gone to Colombia as well, they've just been amazed at the way that they were treated by the individuals. A lot more niceness than what goes on in the U.S., and definitely a lot more cleanliness in a lot of places as well. So I just wondered if that was your take also.
I think a lot of it was, for at least for me, depending on where I'm going, is the waste management, what you're doing with the garbage. If you take it away and hide it, then you don't realize you're using so much. It just seems like that to me, because there was no waste management in the village, and they weren't using any.
Mhm.
But when I'm in the city, I'm filling up a garbage can all the time, right? So depending on what area you live in and how you're living, right? I mean, those people in the village, they're strong. They're strong. They're bending over gardening. They're moving all the time. And here I'm in the city. I got all this garbage in the garbage can, and I'm sitting a lot. I'm working in an office, or I come and watch my TV. My face is in a phone, whatever. And so I think that they're healthier in the regard that they're growing their own food. They're not around a bunch of garbage. They're not buying stuff out of just to be buying stuff. And, which is less stress, right?
Mhm.
You don't punch a time clock the same way you do in this country. There's a lot of cultural differences. Even if you're working 14, 18 hours a day in other countries, it's a different feeling depending on where you are. I don't know. I just feel like people are happier in other places. They're nicer.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe not to Americans. A lot of people don't like Americans. They think we're loud, obnoxious, that kind of thing. But of course, not everyone feels that way.
Right.
But definitely a cultural difference.
No, I definitely can see the culture difference. I was just wondering because you mentioned being in Oakland and growing up as a kid in the 60s and a teenager in the 70s. I definitely remember having a lot of admiration for the Black Panthers, and a lot of people forget that the Black Panthers actually helped create some of the programs that we even use now. I think that they were one of the leaders in terms of like having school meals, and definitely some of the other programs that are now seen as government entities and all in that space. So I just wondered your own take on the Black Panthers as one that grew up in Oakland, and you even mentioned that you did some research on them. So I just wondered your thoughts around the Black Panthers in your own life and what impact they may have had with you.
I was raised in Oakland in the 80s. And I will always remember 2210 10th Avenue, apartment 301, Oakland, California, 94606. I'm always going to remember the phone number. I'm always going to remember the address, even if I develop Alzheimer's dementia, because that long-term memory is going to stick with me, right? But growing up in Oakland and then also living in Alameda, California, and at one point living in Dublin, California, when I was a young teenager, I realized that now I realize I remember my education. I remember that Charlemagne was crowned Empire of the Roman Empire, Emperor of the Roman Empire in 800 AD. But I was not taught about the Black Panthers in school. That's something I had to find out about myself because I was into Black people and Black history and trying to figure out my life. I'm a Rasta woman now, right? And so here it was right under my nose, and I was not taught that. I remember going to Cowboy Park, and they had free lunch there. And me and my sisters would walk down the hill, go to Cowboy Park. But I didn't know Black Panthers started that. I didn't know that. And what I was seeing was a lot of people, it was a crack problem back in the 80s, right? So I seen a lot of that. I seen bums on the street and winos, but I wasn't being taught Black history. So that's something I had to find out myself. It's a shame that even this Ukraine thing that just happened like yesterday, right? Just like that the British got involved with that in the early 1900s, and then it was United States, and it was like, wait a second, this is fairly new. I didn't know about that, but I can remember all this stuff from 2,000 years ago that I was taught in school, but I don't know nothing about what happened just 100 years ago and why this might be the beginning of World War III. I ain't learned none of that stuff, right?
Mhm.
And so to me, I feel like growing up in Oakland, the only reason why I got interested is because the light of Rastafari called me. There's a lot of people growing up in Oakland are not interested in that because they're trying to survive or whatever they're dealing with. You know what I mean? They caught up in they 9 to 5, got to get across that Bay Bridge. You know what I mean? It's,
No,
people
I
are so
do.
distracted.
Yeah, the
So
people are very distracted and everything along those lines. You were saying that, I was thinking to myself that a lot of people, we've been having shows around the Israel and Palestine conflict, and definitely, no doubt, Hamas was a terrorist organization. But there's a lot of folks that will say that this goes back a lot further than just that October 7th attack, and that there is a number of things, including what you just mentioned, which is some of the folks that talk about um, Ethiopia and some of its connections to some of the Middle Eastern prophecies and all along those lines and everything. But definitely a lot of folks don't study as much as probably you and I do, and they are thinking that it started all in 1948 when there was a number of things that happened before 1948 and the creation of Israel, even though some people even in the Israel community would probably say that it was just started in 1948 and along those lines. But there's a lot of historical things that still a lot of folks still have to do research on, and I'd love to hear your take on that as well.
Yeah, that was actually pretty disturbing. I'm like, you know what? Okay, coming from the Rastafari point of view, I'm like, Europeans put their hands all up in people countries and started all of this mess, you know? So, I mean, look at what they did in the Congo, right? Look what they've done in all these different, colonies, right? Um, for the British, and I'm only recently learning this because I knew there was conflict in the Middle East for forever, right? But I didn't know that back in, 100 and a little over 100 years ago or whatever, the British told these Jewish refugees to take up space in Palestine without Palestine's permission. So basically, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna take your master bedroom and master bathroom. Okay, that's mine now. I'm gonna give it to some refugees. They're gonna eventually take over your house, though. Maybe, or maybe they'll just section you off a piece. What is a strip? Right. So I'm like, wait a second. Are you kidding me? The British started this, and then they said, you know what, in the 1940s, you know what, World War II done kicked our butts. Can you, United States, why don't you guys take over? Y'all powerful, y'all got the money, y'all come up with ideas, y'all fix this problem. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so now it's an American problem, it's a United States problem, right? Because America's powerful bully and they all up in people business too. And so I'm like, wow, we can spend all this money. What is the deficit? Are we having a government shutdown again? Are they talking about that again? But all these trillions to all these other countries all the time. And we've got serious, not just infrastructure problems, not just education problems, not just healthcare, senior care issues all over. We've got mental health crisis out here. If we spent some of that war money on helping people, human beings in this country, it would be a lot different. But of course, you got the industrial, conflicts, right? So,
but on that same line, we don't even use the resources that we have. One of the beefs that I have with churches is that they are used for about, most of them, for about 2 or 3 days of the week and all along those lines, but the rest of the time they are sitting empty and all along those lines. And we won't even talk about the office spaces and with the pandemic, the school spaces. But even here in Durham, North Carolina, where I'm at, and I know that it exists there in Arizona, and it definitely exists in California, we got tons of folks that can't find a place to lay their head and a homeless issue. And I'm thinking that there are all these empty buildings. They keep building new apartments, even here in North Carolina, and even those new apartments, they can't fill as fast as they are building them. So I'm still trying to figure out why you're building them if you can't fill them, and you've got people that need a house and that would gladly go into those places if you would reduce the rent rates and all along those lines. So you're charging too much in the first place, and then you've got a homeless problem, because I know that we've got even homeless encampments. I know that there are homeless encampments in Arizona, and there are definitely plenty of them in the parts of California that you used to call home, like Oakland and San Francisco and a number of other places. So it doesn't make any sense to me when the solution seems to be quite obvious, but why the politicians can't see it, probably because it's not putting any money in their pocket. So they're going to go, as you said earlier, into the bottom line, and it's not putting any money into their pockets. They're not caring about the humanitarian aspect of it.
well, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole big conversation right there. How much time you got? uh, okay, so you know what? It's kind of funny. I got this little, I don't know, it's called a meme or something, a little picture and it had two pictures on it though. It was half of the picture was this devil guy, this Satan thing, and the other half was Congress. And it said the caption was, "When I was little, I didn't know which one really was the devil. Now I know," or something like that,
Right.
right? And I'm like, they don't care. The corporations are running this thing. Just pay them off, lobbyists, whatever, right? So, and our country, unfortunately, has always been that. So there you go.
Yep, that's very much the case and everything. But I was just wondering, because one of the things that I know that you have to deal with, even in your own work, is everything is the negativity. And I know there's a lot of people that are caught up in the negativity. I've heard that a lot of people are even thinking about the walking zombies that are out there in our population that don't know their sense of purpose or which direction they are going, and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, how do you personally deal with those folks that are trying to bring negative energy to you? Because I'm sure that there are folks that are regularly talking to you, and you just mentioned earlier that you've seen definitely some very devastating things. I'm sure that in your work as an EMT, you've probably seen some things that you wish you hadn't seen, and all along those lines. So I just wondering, how do you not bring that negativity into other aspects of your life?
So I would like to clarify, I became an EMT during the pandemic in
Mhm.
2020. I did not get on the back of an ambulance and start working in emergency rooms and hauling people off. I was still in senior living.
Right.
So, I didn't necessarily have to give CPR to people because they were DNRs.
Right.
Right. And so I did not use my EMT certification to get on an ambulance and go out there to people's houses when they're having seizures and whatever, to revive them. But what's happening out here with these zombies, some of these are some young people.
Hmm.
And I mean, we got teenagers right here that are on all of these little $2 pills. It don't cost nothing
Hmm.
for these drugs now, right? So I think a lot of it though is it's the decay of society. You can see it crumbling. I mean, here they done cleaned up San Francisco for a meeting, right? But they can't put any resources towards helping any of these people.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can push them down the street, but what is that going to do? That ain't helping them.
No.
I mean, yes, in this country, there are social services, though. There is welfare, there is social security. Hopefully that lasts. There is, some assistance, whereas in other countries, there may not be that at all. Right. So a lot of people will say, well, at least, but it also makes people dependent on the system. We are enabling a whole lot of people to sit at home. And I know that because it's hard finding caregivers because they're like, I make more money on the welfare food stamps and my Section 8 housing. I can only make a certain amount of money. So they aren't even interested in growing because they're getting this handout. So there's this weird bunch of gray lines. You got people that have fallen and they are destitute in the street. And now some of the, like my Uncle Paul. My Uncle Paul, if he came to my grandma's house, he'd sleep on the patio outside. There was something else in his mind that was triggering him that he felt he wanted to be homeless. It wasn't necessarily because he got kicked out because he couldn't pay the rent. Right. And so there's different dynamics going on that's causing this homeless problem, but for it to be getting worse and worse and worse, and the CEOs are making more and more and more, and everything is more expensive. And, it's all to me, it's strategic planning. I don't know if you believe in any of um, the word out there that, I'm not saying it's the end of times because they've been saying that for what, 10,000 years. Everybody been saying it's the end of times, but it's definitely the end of an era as we know it. It's about to shift. Things are about to change. We might have been on top for a long time, but our society is decaying and no one is addressing the problem because they're too busy talking a bunch of crap and giving money everywhere else. So
No, I definitely agree with that, and I've heard some people that have even said that it might be a positive shift that is about to happen because there are definitely some people that are seeing some more impasse and some more people that are there that it might be creating a positive atmosphere, even though we've got to get through this madness in order to get to the positivity. So that's where I am hopeful that they are right, and only time will tell. But definitely that is where my hope is existing, that maybe there will be some ability to change things and make it in a more positive environment, even though, like I said, that can be a difficult wish. And like I said, it doesn't know that that's going to necessarily be the case, but that is my wish, that it goes in that direction and all along those lines. But it'll definitely be interesting to see how it plays out and if that is actually what happens or doesn't happen, because definitely that's kind of my own personal wish. But like I said, wishes are like a lot of things. They sometimes they come true, sometimes they don't. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out in the way that life goes on and all in that space. But yeah, I'm definitely one of those people that is cautiously optimistic. But like I said, I am cautiously optimistic because, like you said, it could be that we are heading into a negative tailspin, and who knows where that could lead to, and all along those lines. But I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic because one thing that I've learned is I've got a lot of faith in our young people, because I've seen a lot of the young people doing some amazing things despite the bullying that they face and despite there being a love of social media. But I've also seen some positive things from our young people as well. So I do wish that they would sometimes do more cross-generational conversation and all in that space. But I do see them doing some amazing things. So maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic. But I don't know if you've got kids with that Kenyan husband of yours, or whether you think that this is a world that you would even want to bring kids into, or all along those lines, or your own thoughts about the future that the youth of the world are about to inherit.
I have children and grandchildren. Yes, I try to stay positive. I mean, we're not in a different country where we don't have freedom of speech, where we don't have freedom to get in a car and go down the street and order another thing on Amazon, right? So, I try and stay as positive as I can, but I am realistic.
Right.
There are storms and there are sunshines. And so it just always is going to come and go over the next another 2, 10, 50 million years, for all I know. This is just a blip in time,
Right.
positive and negative. We take it all. You have to accept it that all of it's going to be, in its own time. So I do feel that our only hope is the young, because eventually I'll be that age that I'm ready for senior living, and I'm realistic about the fact that I will die too. I'm a death doula. I've already got my little plans, and this is how I want it to be, and here's my playlist. Things like that. I'm just that kind of person. But I am feeling good that my grandchildren, at least they have more tolerance that they can deal with versus how rigid it was. I mean, back in the 80s, if you had a tattoo, that was like, wow, right? But now you can, or a mohawk. Mohawks in the 80s, that was like real punk rocker, right? Now it's no big deal. You can have a whole sleeve of tattoos. Ain't nobody really worried about that. And so at least there's more acceptance of people doing, being human, right? And their emotions and things like that.
Well, there's more
Of course,
acceptance in some societies. I don't know if there's more
far-fetched.
acceptance in all societies, because I actually just had a friend of mine who is a member of the LGBTQIA community that just sent me an email because they were doing a fundraiser providing turkeys for that day that's coming around next weekend, Thanksgiving and everything. But they were, even though this particular farm had been supplying it for 2 years, they got an email that basically said that they could no longer supply them because they did not share the same values. And the only difference in values was that this particular friend of mine is a member of the LGBTQIA community. So they were going to cut off the turkeys to the other people because they felt that they did not have common goals or common life aspirations or whatever. And I'm going like, but wait a minute, for 2 years you gave them turkeys, but now because you have had it in your head that this is a immoral act, that you're going to cut it off, and the people you're cutting off might not have even been part of that community, because as my friend put it, they were giving turkeys to a variety of people. It wasn't just people from that particular community and everything, but this particular farm decided that they could not see past that difference in order to supply some much needed turkey. So now they're scrambling, trying to find a new supplier, and might even be a more expensive supplier. But that's what I'm saying. When there is this going on, and then a friend of mine who is a symphony conductor was told that they couldn't play certain symphony songs because they were either race-based or had some other kind of things that were going on, that they felt that they couldn't play it on this particular radio station and everything. So there are still some people that with some very closed-minded attitudes. I'll just leave it at that and everything, and folks can do their research and see what their our thoughts on. But I'm just thinking that unfortunately we have too many people that are closed-minded. And I'm not saying that you got to agree with everything that people do, but you also need to have some sense of kindness in what you do.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's a shame that everybody's trying to judge everybody else. I mean, gosh, man, what you do in your private bedroom is your privacy. Ain't got nothing to do with nobody else. Get out of people's business. It's business. Do business. Collect your money. Collect your turkeys. Whatever you got to do, and just move on. Treat other human beings like human beings. Don't worry about their culture or their whatever. Okay, whatever. I do see there is progress though,
Yeah.
because it's not as chastised as it once was. There wouldn't have been a LGBTQ organization that was strong in the 80s when I was growing up. You
Right.
know, they were saying some real nasty things. People were, I remember one of my cousins getting beat up. His jaw was all dislocated and everything, you know, just because he was gay. And some dudes had to pump out their chest. You know, he wasn't doing nothing. He wasn't even hitting on them. They just, you know, were assholes. He's not like what you. They're just, you know, mean, right? So people need to get over. That's how I feel, at least. People need to get over themselves, humble yourself. Jesus Christ, if you Christian, Jesus Christ would not have denied, you know, someone the right to do as they need to live. I mean, gosh, man, who are you to judge who someone loves?
Exactly. That's where my attitude is. Who are you to judge what they are doing in their life and all along those lines? But yeah, you got some people with some very warped views. I was just wondering if we get ready to wind down very shortly. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know it took us a minute to get together and all along those lines, but one of the things that we oftentimes talk about on this network and just in general is the idea, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, of the work-life balance and everything. So I was just wondering, how do you manage to have the successful life that you do with your husband, and to have that relationship with both the kids and the grandkids and all in that space? And how do you manage to balance that with all the various things that you do? Because you are definitely multi-talented and all along those lines. So how do you actually manage to juggle all these things and have that, some people would say, elusive work-life balance?
I like to think my work-life balance, my whole like every day revolves around my garden.
Hmm.
And it was, I basically started digging a hole in the ground in my front yard during the pandemic in June of 2020, actually. And I from that hole in the ground, it's a pond. Okay. And I have my little waterfall, and then I did my pergola. And this is all my hands. I'm doing this myself, right? I did all of it. Now it's an overgrown jungle. But that's my serenity. I've got my birds out there. I've got fish and turtles in the pond. The grandkids, they come over, they dig for worms. They're not on their iPads or whatever. They're out there actually playing and playing with roly-poly bugs and things like that, right? And so that part to me is very important, that I'm in nature, that I'm barefoot in the grass, in the dirt, whatever, without the rubber soles on my feet, connecting with nature, not thinking about work. That is huge. If you can turn your phone off and not think about your 9 to 5, then you will have more balance. Of course, I need to exercise and eat better too. I'm a culprit for, you know, American cuisine. Even though I was Rasta and I was eating, you know, vegan at one point, I stopped doing that and I started eating some, you know, hamburger stuff. I don't eat pork, but still I eat animals. And so it's important for me that I do some exercise and get that blood flowing, because I don't need to develop vascular disease or anything. So I think exercise is very important. Your lifestyle in general is going to, you know, determine if you're going to stave off some of those diseases anyway. So your social connections, there's your work-life balance.
Yeah, that work-life balance is very important. I know a lot of people don't feel enough of that connection. You mentioned something else that I'm a big proponent of, and it sounds like you are as well. So, how important is it to you to have that groundedness and that connection to nature? I am one of those people that believes that we need to be healthy on a variety of levels, both the mental and the physical, but also the spiritual. I'm not as big on religion as I am on spirituality, and definitely big on emotional as well. So I just wonder, it sounds to me like you are well connected to Mother Nature, and I definitely think that that is an amazing thing. I know that even seeing a simple rabbit or a simple butterfly can put a big smile on my face, and all along those lines, and all in that space. So, how important is it for you to have that connection to Mother Nature?
For me, it's all important. And even for people who have dementia, it's all important. It helps with that circadian rhythm. It helps get people back in tune with themselves, I think, because and meditation, we got our eyes open all day long. There's something in our face. If it's not the phone or the TV, it's somebody, it's work, it's whatever. And we don't really close our eyes unless it's time to go to sleep. But you know what? When you close your eyes, you're looking within now. And unfortunately, the only outlet that is really being pushed, at least, what it something like seems like to me is religion, organized, structured, go to church, make it like this, but you still got your eyes open unless you're praying, right? And so I feel like we need to be closing our eyes and grounding ourselves and listening to our breath and just, you know, um, getting more in tune with nature in general. I mean, I have a hammock out there. And so sometimes it'll be 2 o'clock in the morning, especially if it's like a full moon, because it's really bright and it's beautiful, right? And so I'll go out there on the hammock. If I wake up in the middle of the night, I might go out there and sit for 20, 30 minutes, and just kind of be in my hammock. There's your work-life balance. But for me, being in nature, being in the trees, being in the grass, just being outside is very helpful for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. How important do you think it is? Because, like I said, I'm at the Hayti Center. It's definitely got some ancestors that have gone on. We actually have Baba Chuck Davis, who was a dance pioneer that has a mural as well as kind of a marionette figure that salute his life and all along those lines. And there are some other people that have their legacies here as well, whether that is things that have been named after them or other ways that they were honored, or maybe just even memories of them and all along those lines that have passed on that were part of the history here and all in that space. So I just wondering, how important is it for you to have that ancestral connection? And is it something that you thrive on and that you enjoy both as a Rasta woman or just in life in general? Because I know that I still feel that even though she passed away back in the early 80s, that my grandmother and some other people still guide some of the path that I go on as well. But I just wondering, how important do you think it is to have those ancestral connections?
Oh, that's all important for me. I only a few years ago I learned. Now I already knew that my grandparents, they were born and raised on plantations in Vacherie, Louisiana, the Laura Plantation. It's now a museum. My maiden name is Gross, Gross. It looks like they added an S at the early 1900s, because before then it was just Gros. But anyways, I learned a few years ago that my fourth great grandfather, I guess it would be, back in 1816, he was sold to that Laura plantation, um, to Laura de Park, in the summer of 1816, and he kept running away. And so he was branded on both cheeks.
Hmm.
And he ended up having a son who fought in the Civil War named Edward, and he lost a thumb. Right. And he was a carpenter. Right. And I'm learning all these things, and I'm like, okay. And then he had, and that's my grandparent. Right. And I'm like, wow, this is great. And so I got to go to the plantation and do the little tour and stuff like that. And I can remember my grandma Gross years ago talking about how she grew up on that plantation and some of the stories that she told about being born on that plantation, right? So it's a living history still, because she wasn't that removed. You know, they moved to San Diego when my grandfather joined the Navy. Couldn't join the Army. They wouldn't let Black people in the Army. And so he joined the Navy. And of course, that is what uprooted him into the San Diego area in California. But yeah, that history, it's so important. So I started doing the ancestry.com stuff and try to get more information. I'm learning all these cousins, and I'm like, wow, I got a lot of people in Louisiana. But it's very important, you know, that connection, that knowing. I was born in St. Croix, Virgin Islands, only because my father worked for a water purification company in St. Croix, WAPA. And so that's why I happened to be born in the Virgin Islands. But yeah, culture, heritage, ancestry, all of these things are extremely important for me.
Sounds like very amazing and all along those lines. Well, like I said, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I know it took us a minute to get together, and definitely hopefully I can get you back on a future one as well and share even when the new book comes out and all along those lines. But one of the things that I do with all of my guests is have them tell how they can be reached and how they can be found and all along those lines, and also definitely have them give an opportunity to give a message because it's something that I believe is one of my own personal messages and everything a message of hope because like I said we're heard in a number of countries. I think the last estimate was somewhere between 175 to 200 and all along those lines, not necessarily at the time of the airing but definitely during the course of the airing and the re-airings and all in that space. So I get all my guests to give a message of hope and positivity to our global audience. So any messages you would like to share and anything that you haven't got to that you would like to share that we haven't touched. But definitely, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that we can do this again in the not too distant future and all along those lines. But definitely, I've enjoyed this conversation, and I would love to use and give the ways that you can be reached and any message of positivity that you would like to share with our global audience.
Yeah, my name is Jennifer Owenda. I write under a couple of pen names. Jen Owenda. I do a lot of my senior care books. Jen Owenda. You can find my books on Amazon. I did the one um, Cold Hearts, Warm Bodies, The Secrets Inside Assisted Living. I did another one, ABC, Alzheimer's Book for Children. There's quite a few of my books on Amazon. My website is my name, jenniferawinda.com. So JenniferAwinda.com. And yeah, if you just search my name, a lot of stuff comes up because I've done so many books and so many speakings and so many different things. And so I'm a busybody. I got a lot of videos out there, YouTube, dementia videos and things like that, just for education. There is hope. There is hope, that's for sure, because people are getting more health conscious. People are understanding that there are toxins in the foods. And so in order to live better, you need to improve the food that you're eating. You need to be moving. You need those social connections. And although everyone has to die, it's not a negative thing. It's just another chapter in our journey. It is not a final journey. Even every religion has some type of an afterlife, even Christianity, you know, right. And so I'm like, wow, you know, on earth as it is in heaven, right? And so there is something positive to look forward to. You don't have to be afraid of hospice. It's not a death sentence. It's going to make you feel a little more in control of pain management and comfort care. You don't have to be afraid of those last breaths because when you were being born, yeah, you might have been in pain, but there was epidurals for your mom or whatever, right? There was people welcoming you into this world. Most of us had names picked out already, baby cribs, whatever. At least even if there wasn't that, there was someone who was there to support you. And one of the most wonderful poems out there is called Gone From My Sight. And I'm not going to recite the poem or anything, but it's
please do. Please do.
Well, no, I'm not going there. It's a beautiful poem, Gone From My Sight. And it's kind of like, you know, we see this ship It's a huge, massive ship, and it's flowing away. And you see it going into the horizon, and it's disappearing, and then you don't see it anymore. And we're like, wow, it's gone. But on the other side, there are people welcoming that ship. It's going to another harbor. All that freight is going to be offloaded onto that harbor, right, into that dock or whatever. So you don't have to be afraid of the unknown, because everything that you've ever experienced in life had a positive outcome eventually. Even if it was a terrible situation, you learned from it. Something came out of that. So my positive feelings are embrace change. Change is okay. We're going to get through it, and we always do. And when that final breath comes, remember, even though you'll be gone from sight here, you'll be welcomed somewhere else.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing message and everything. I'm sure that folks can also hear about your company, because apparently there's a company that you have that is called Timeless Doula Services LLC. So they feel like they can learn about that as well. And definitely that sounds as part of your uh, things that you do. Like you said, you're a busybody and have a lot of different things going on, including being a mother and a grandmother and all along those lines. And that is a great thing. I was just curious really quickly about the pen name Empress Ivory, because I did see that as well. I was like, I wonder how she came up with that name and everything, and whether she thinks of herself as being a true empress as well. So definitely I was curious about that other pen name that I saw as well.
I know if someone calls me Empress Ivory or Ivory, they're going to be calling me from my Rasta family. That's been my nickname for a long time, Ivory. And I know if they call me by Jennifer, it's about senior care, it's about death doula. So it's when I write under my pen name Empress Ivory, those are going to be more of those books about African history or Rastafari or history in general. I got, stuff about Australia and the Aborigines and how, things affected them, right? So um, Empress Ivory, that one is, whatever I feel like writing about, my environmental conservation or whatever I decide. But Jenna Wenda, that's going to be my senior care, my dementia, my death doula. I kind of separate those two things.
Well, that makes sense. Just out of curiosity, because we do have a gentleman here that is from Australia, and they were involved in that fight for Aborigine rights. I actually think that they were the ones that were pushing against the need for the Aborigines to be in legislation and all in that space. But I just wondered your thoughts around the Aborigines and how they have been treated in Australia. I don't know enough about that area, but it sounds like you've done some research. I was just wondering your thoughts around the Aborigine population there in Australia.
Just like with, the people that have gone through things in South America and Africa and India and all these other places, in this country, North America and Canada, that European hand that went into Australia had no positive intentions. That's for sure. It was selfish. It was greed. It was evil. There was evil going on, and um, no matter how everyone's going to come up with their own different way they feel about it, and that's all fine. But for me, I'm sickened by how these things have happened. But since they have happened, all we can do is move forward from that and try to I mean, it's not the 5 stages of grief, right? We have to get back beyond it somehow and work together. um, Unfortunately, man dominates man, and so I'm just trying to stay positive. I don't see why people of all colors shouldn't be trying to make some of the laws and be part of those decisions. But at the same time, the Rasta part of me says fire burn the system. The system has been wicked since day one, since start. There's no fixing something that's been evil from day one. You got to collapse it and start afresh with better better ideas, but that ain't gonna happen either. So I really don't have the answer for that. I think more of the Rasta part of me comes out, that fire burn this right. There needs to be reparations,
Mhm.
but that ain't gonna happen either. That's just like saying we don't need the corporations running the country. I don't foresee that happening either. So just keep getting grounded within. And there's one person that I'd like to mention, and I think he just passed away too, Brother Panic.
Mm.
He was doing the YouTube videos and all that stuff and all this information, and I love listening to him because he's looking from within. I can't fix everything, right? But I can fix here. I know I have my own journey. Every person has their own journey. So I need to respect everyone, whatever you to each his own. Okay, I'm not going to judge you. I got my own faults. Every single person got their own issues,
Mhm.
right? I'd rather walk in my shoes than anyone else's. But that's I try and stay positive in that regard. But I'm realistic that the system, it was designed to, I mean, we've been electing the same politicians for the past thousands of years. It's the same people up in there, same spirit, even if it's a different body. I just feel that way. And again, the Rasta part of me, it's been part of my life and forever. And I think that dominates my reality of things more than hopes and dreams.
No, I definitely can agree with you on that and everything. I was just thinking that a lot of people are frustrated and are scared of what may be happening because we're going to have a president, no matter whether it is the current one or the one that was before him, that will definitely be in their late 70s and early 80s. And there are some folks that are hoping that we would have more youth voice and all in that space, but it doesn't look like that is happening. So it looks like we are heading toward a rematch between Biden and Trump, and whoever wins. I think that if Trump wins, he'll be in his late 70s, and if Biden wins, I think he's going to be like 82 or 83. And I'm not saying that folks of that age can't still be very sharp. My dad is 83 and still very sharp. And I think that he's still out there doing his artwork, as well as even what his lady love was doing some dancing and all in that space with a dance performance that she was part of. And I want to say that she's maybe a few years younger, so she might be in her late 70s or pushing near her early 80s as well. But definitely, I think that sometimes we need to have the notion that we can still be active even in our older ages. As a matter of fact, a group that usually meets here, I don't think they met this month because they were meeting out of at another facility, but there's a group of African American quilters, and I want to say all of those ladies are in their 70s or 80s, and there's another group that is called the Dancing Divas or something like that, and it is a cheerleading group, and I think that all of those ladies are in their 70s, 80s, or something in that space. So definitely there's a lot of folks that are still being very active even in their later years and all in that space. I've even seen some folks that might even be doing jump ropes that are in their 80s and 90s and all
But
in
but
that space.
but there's a point when people need to retire
Mm-hmm.
and let the young make the decisions for themselves. Because here you're in your 80s, gonna be 88 years old. What, dude, you trying to call shots for things that are going to ripple down the decades? You're gonna be long gone.
Right.
It's time to move on. If you qualify for Social Security, it's time for you to retire. Biden, Trump, all of y'all, go. Let the young people, they got better minds. They got better ideas. Your ancient ways are not helping. So we need some freshness. We need young people in making these decisions.
No, we definitely need some more young voices and all in that space. I would agree with you on that because some of these folks that are having some outdated ways are definitely past their time of usefulness in the sense of what they can accomplish and all in those lines. I'm not saying that they are going to not be here on the planet. I mean, shucks, and Jimmy Carter's still around, and he's about to be 100, even though people were thinking that he was already gone. But I think that he is still alive, and even though I think he might be in hospice care as well, he might be one of those folks that gets to spend another 5 to 10 years in hospice care because he does seem to have a very strong constitution and all along those lines. But as last time I checked, I think he was in hospice care, but he did go out for some of the celebrations. I think that was to celebrate one of his anniversaries or something like that. I can't remember if it was his birthday or the anniversary between him and Rosalind or what it was, but I do know that he was in hospice care and then came out of hospice care not that long ago and all in that space. So like you said, hospice care can last longer than sometimes people think it will last and all in that kind of way. So definitely I think that a lot of people are having negative attitudes about hospice care. And I know that even Duke Health, which is right around the corner from me, they are one of those that has one of the top hospice cares in all in that kind of way. So they are actually seen as being a positive hospice care. And it'll be interesting to see folks' thoughts around that. But yeah, I'm just amazed that Jimmy Carter is still around. And like I said, I know that he was in hospice care. And I do think that he was recently let out. And I can't remember if that was to celebrate 100 or what that was. But as soon as he went into hospice care, folks were like, well, this is the end. But he's still around, and it's already about to be the end of 2023. And it sounds like he's still very much himself in hospice care, according to what some of the reports that I was hearing, and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting because back in October, he turned 99. So definitely that's what's going on is he turned 99. So he might be hitting that century mark. Only time will tell, and all along those lines. So he entered hospice care, and then 7 months later, he was turning 99. So, like I said, who knows? Maybe he'll make it to 100 because that was back in October 1st that I saw the article that sometime around that time frame is when he hit that 99 number. So next year he might be hitting the 100 mark.
Very cool. Yeah, the people are living a long time now, and I'm glad that he's got his wits about himself. That's thankful.
He was very thankful, and that's what it was. I think it was one of those times he was actually seen in, I think it was Plains, Georgia, riding in a black SUV at the Plains Peanut Festival. So all the people know that he was a peanut farmer. So I guess he was out there enjoying some of that festival life and all in that space. So he was even finding something, as you mentioned earlier, find things that you enjoy and continue doing them until you can't do them anymore. So it sounds like he was definitely having that attitude of doing something that he was still enjoying. And who knows, he might have some more years of enjoying it as well. But that's one of the things that I saw was he was still out there enjoying his life as best he could and all in that space. What as we head out the door and everything, what advice would you just want to give to folks just in general that are thinking about their life in general and maybe even their care of their elderly? So if there's any final words that you want to give in the sense of final advice for those that might be dealing with elderly care that you want to give, as that is part of your main lane of expertise and everything. But definitely, I certainly, as I said several times, enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that you'll make a return trip in the not too distant future.
Thank you. Private long-term care insurance. If you are not already diagnosed with a debilitating disease and you're not 80 years old, but you're younger than that, look into private long-term care insurance because senior care costs a lot of money. We're talking $10,000, $15,000 a month, right? And if you have private long-term care insurance that covers not only skilled nursing or nursing homes, but also senior living and also in-home care, caregivers come into your home, you're going to be better off financially because it's astronomical out there. The community I am working for now, memory care, dementia care, tops out at $13,000 a month. And it's only 2023. Okay, so in another 10, 20 years, if I think about it, only 5 years ago, right before the pandemic, it was like 6,000, 6,000, and now it's like 10 more. So we're, private long-term care insurance, Definitely hospice doesn't mean a death sentence. I've got several people that have gotten booted off a hospice in the facility, and it just kind of happens like that. One lady, she's been on it for over 2 years. She's not getting booted off of it, but because she falls a lot. Oh, and that's another thing. Falls happen just like with your infant that's learning to walk, your newborn or your toddler or whatever that's learning to walk. They fall. On the other side of the spectrum, your seniors, they fall. It's just kind of what happens. If there's a urinary tract infection, there's probably going to be increased confusion and agitation and things like that. So if you're experiencing or working with someone who has issues with dementia or confusion, get it diagnosed, man. We definitely need to know what we're working with. We're going to be better prepared. But yeah, that's my advice. Private long-term care insurance and use hospice as when you can, because it's going to be helpful for you. It's going to be added support. And death doula, a death doula is going to help with those last transitions and give you a bit more support.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up and everything, because actually one of the two founders of this network, one of them is very much into women's rights and definitely around women's issues, including some of the things dealing with domestic abuse and other things in that space. And she actually was a engineer that created some stuff that is actually some of the tracking devices for those that are the folks that are causing the problem for women and all along those lines and everything. So I can't remember the exact nature of the device, but maybe one time I'll have you and Kim on a similar show. And then the other founder, Kim Calhoun, is that young lady who is a founder in the engineering space. And then the other person that founded this network, Nick Palveda, is definitely involved in the pension business. So he has the National Pension Fund and is definitely involved as a pension attorney. So he is definitely one that talks a lot about these issues that you're talking about with insurance and other things as well. So they will definitely be glad that you brought that topic up on this particular show, as that is a topic that they are very passionate about as well. So definitely, I have thoroughly, as I said several times, enjoyed this conversation, and we're going to end everything right now, unless there's some final words that you want to just share as we're heading out the door. But I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and hopefully, like I said, I'll see you in the near future. But I'll give you the last words if there's any final words that you want to share.
My final word would be this book that I'm about to publish is going to be really helpful. Navigating Senior Care, Dementia, and Dying. It'll be available on Amazon right around Christmas. So it's going to help answer a lot of questions and get people through the most challenging transition of life.
Sounds good. And on that note, we're going to end right here, and we'll be back with another episode in the not too distant future. So definitely have thoroughly enjoyed having Jennifer Owinda on. And right now we're going to get on out of here with some commercials. But right now we're getting ready to end this. But definitely a fun conversation, and look forward to seeing Jennifer on a future